It's funny how something that seems so peaceful can quickly turn into a nightmare. I've camped alone in the wilderness for years, but one weekend in the San Juan National Forest made me rethink everything I thought I knew about nature. What I experienced there was beyond anything I could ever explain, and it's the reason I'll never set foot in that place again. It started like any other camping trip. I was eager to escape the city for a few days, leaving behind the noise and stress. I had an old, reliable RV that I always took with me on these trips, along with my gear, and enough food to last me several days. This time, I was headed to a remote spot deep within the forest, a place I'd been hearing about for a while. It was known for its serenity, the kind of place where you could just let go and let the forest consume you in its silence. The drive up was long and winding, but the scenery was breathtaking. The sun was setting as I turned off the main road onto a dirt trail that would take me deeper into the wilderness. The path was rough, barely wide enough for the RV, but I didn't mind. I'd been down worse roads. The only sounds were the rumbling of the engine and the occasional call of a bird high in the trees. When I arrived at the campsite, it was already dark, and the forest was eerily quiet. The trees loomed tall and close, their branches heavy with the weight of the night. There was no sign of other campers, no noise from animals, nothing. Just the oppressive silence that seemed to swallow the world whole. I parked the RV and set up camp, building a small fire to keep the chill at bay. I always loved how the fire flickered in the darkness, the warmth providing a sense of comfort amidst the vast emptiness. As I sat there, roasting marshmallows and watching the flames dance, something started to feel off. I couldn't quite place it, but there was a tension in the air, a feeling that something was wrong. The silence was unsettling. I'd been camping many times, but this was different. It felt as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I shrugged it off, convincing myself that I was just tired. After a long day of driving, I decided to call it a night. I extinguished the fire, locked the RV door, and crawled into bed. But as I lay there, trying to fall asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I closed my eyes, I would hear something, distant rustling, the snap of a twig, as if something was moving around the campsite. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe an animal, maybe the wind. But the more I listened, the more the sound seemed deliberate, slow, measured. Suddenly, I heard it. A loud, unmistakable thump against the side of the RV. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it out the window. There was nothing. The campsite was still, the shadows deep and unbroken. But the thumping continued. A few seconds later, it came again, harder this time, as if something was deliberately banging against the RV. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door and stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. The campsite was empty. The fire pit was still cold, the ashes nothing more than remnants of warmth long gone. But there, just a few feet from the RV, was a trail in the dirt. Footprints. But they weren't animal tracks. They were too human. The prints were large, with a strange dragging motion to them, as if something, or someone, had been walking in a way that didn't make sense. I followed the trail, flashlight in hand, my footsteps crunching in the dead silence. The footprints led me toward the trees, and as I got closer, I felt the air grow colder. It wasn't just the temperature, it was like the forest itself was rejecting me. I turned back to the RV, my heart racing. I had no idea who or what had been out there, but I knew I wasn't alone. As I made my way back to the RV, I heard something, a voice, a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it was close. So close, it sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, my blood running cold. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but again, I saw nothing. The voice was gone, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. I bolted back into the RV, locked the door, and sat there, wide awake, listening to the silence. The hours seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness pressing in around me. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't move. The feeling of something being out there, just beyond my reach, was suffocating. Then, just before dawn, I heard it again. A thud, and then another, and another. It was coming from the roof of the RV. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it through the windows, shining it at the roof. For a long moment there was nothing. Then, as I stared in disbelief, I saw something moving across the top of the RV. It wasn't a person, it wasn't an animal. It was like a shadow, moving in a way that didn't seem natural. The thuds continued, but they were getting louder, more violent. It was as if whatever was up there was trying to break through. I felt trapped, alone in that tiny RV, with whatever was out there just waiting to get in. I didn't think twice. I started the RV, put it in gear, and sped down the dirt road, not even looking back. The thudding stopped, but that voice, soft and distant, almost like a low hum, echoed in my ears. The drive back to the nearest town was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just experienced. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened that night. Was it something supernatural? A wild animal? I don't know, but I do know that I'll never return to that spot. I've never felt such an intense sense of dread in my life, and I don't ever want to feel it again. So, if you're ever out there, deep in the San Juan National Forest, and you come across an isolated campsite by a creek, take my advice. Turn around. You don't want to find out what's lurking in the shadows. It had been a long week of work, and I was itching for a break. The kind of break that only nature could provide. So, I packed up my RV with some food, my gear, and enough supplies for a weekend getaway in the San Juan National Forest. The plan was simple. Drive into the heart of the forest, find a quiet, secluded campsite, and spend a couple of days disconnecting from everything. No phone service, no distractions, just me and the wilderness. The journey was peaceful at first, as I drove deeper into the mountains, leaving civilization behind. The forest grew denser, the trees towering on either side of the road like silent sentinels. I found myself alone in the vast landscape, the sound of my tires crunching on the gravel road, the only noise for miles. I was beginning to feel the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. It was exactly what I needed. I arrived at the campsite just as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the forest floor. It was perfect. A small, isolated clearing next to a stream. The area looked untouched, like a hidden gem that only a few knew about. I parked the RV, set up camp, and built a fire. As the flames flickered and crackled, I relaxed and enjoyed the tranquility of the place. But then, as the night wore on, I began to feel uneasy. The air grew colder, and an oppressive silence settled over the camp. There were no animal sounds, no rustling of leaves in the wind, just the crackling of the fire. I chalked it up to being alone in the forest. Your mind can start playing tricks on you when you're isolated like that. It wasn't until around midnight that things took a strange turn. I was sitting by the fire, sipping on some tea when I heard it, a rustling noise. Not from the trees, but from the brush near the edge of the clearing. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely there. I tensed up, listening closely. The sound stopped, and for a moment I thought it was just an animal, maybe a squirrel or a raccoon. But then it came again, a distinct thud, followed by a scraping sound, like something heavy dragging across the ground. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and walked cautiously toward the noise. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I reached the edge of the clearing, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. There was nothing there. Confused and a little unnerved, I returned to the fire, telling myself it was probably just an animal. But the sense of being watched only grew stronger. It felt as though something was out there, observing me from the darkness. I tried to shake it off and decided to get some sleep. I retreated to the RV, locked the door, and crawled into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear it, the faint sound of footsteps, the occasional scratch against the side of the RV. I wasn't sure if it was real or if I was just imagining it, but the noises were persistent. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a loud bang against the side of the RV. My heart raced as I scrambled out of bed and grabbed my flashlight. The noise came again, louder this time, like something had just thrown itself at the RV. I rushed to the window, shining the flashlight outside, and that's when I saw it. A figure. It was standing just outside the RV, at the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the darkness. At first, I thought it was a person, but then I saw how unnaturally still it was, how it blended into the shadows like it didn't belong. The figure stood there for what felt like an eternity, not moving, just staring. I couldn't make out any details. No face, no clothes, just the outline of a tall, thin body. It felt wrong, like the air around it was charged with an unnatural energy. I couldn't look away, but I didn't want to move either. My breath caught in my throat as the figure slowly tilted its head toward me. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to get out of there. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys, started the RV, and drove off into the night. The whole way down the narrow, winding road, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. I half expected to see that figure following me, but there was nothing. Just the dark forest behind me, silent and still. When I finally reached the nearest town, I stopped at a gas station to collect myself. I was shaken, exhausted, and terrified. I knew something had been watching me that night, something that wasn't human, something that didn't belong. As I pumped gas, I noticed a small group of locals standing nearby. I overheard one of them mention the forest. It was just a passing comment, but the words chilled me to the bone. "You know about that old campsite near the creek?" one of them asked. The others nodded. "Yeah, it's a bad place, always has been. Folks used to say there's something wrong with the land there. People would disappear, or strange things would happen. It's not a place anyone should be." I didn't ask for more details. I didn't want to hear them. I just paid for my gas, got in the RV, and left. I haven't been back to that spot since, and I don't think I ever will. Some places in the forest, they're better left undisturbed. This is the story I've never told publicly before, not in full detail, but it happened. Every word of it. And I've never gone back to the San Juan National Forest since. It was late September when I decided to take my RV into the mountains for a solo retreat. I had just finished a hectic project and needed to unplug. San Juan National Forest seemed like the perfect place. Remote, breathtakingly beautiful, and filled with trails I'd only read about online. I mapped out a quiet, dispersed camping spot near the Piedra River, away from the main traffic of hikers and campers. I arrived mid-afternoon. The aspen leaves were already golden and rustling in the wind. I set up camp on a small clearing off a Forest Service road, no other RVs or tents in sight. It was exactly the isolation I had hoped for. My cell signal had already dropped to zero about 20 minutes before I reached the site, which I expected. That was the whole point. No distractions. The first day passed uneventfully. I cooked dinner outside, watched the stars come out in a crystal clear sky, and slept like a log. But it was the second night that everything changed. Around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to what I can only describe as deliberate footsteps outside my RV. Now, animals in the forest, deer, elk, even bears, they move differently. They're fast, they shuffle, they scratch. But these sounded like boots. Slow, crunching footsteps in the dry leaves. 1, 2, pause. 3. I froze. My RV isn't very large, and it's old, meaning the walls aren't insulated enough to block out subtle sounds. I didn't move. I didn't turn on the lights. I just listened. The footsteps circled halfway around the RV and then stopped. Nothing. For at least 5 minutes. I was sweating and holding my breath at the same time. I finally got the courage to peek through one of the slits in the blinds. Nothing. Total darkness. No flashlight, no silhouette, nothing. I convinced myself it was probably an animal. Maybe a mountain lion pacing around, though that wouldn't explain the two-legged rhythm. Eventually, I fell back asleep out of sheer exhaustion. The next day, I decided not to pack up yet. I rationalized the sound as my imagination or an animal, but I stayed alert. I went on a short hike that morning, but was constantly looking over my shoulder. And then I noticed something strange when I returned to camp. A small stone, round and pale, placed directly in the middle of the welcome mat in front of my RV door. That stone hadn't been there when I left. I'm meticulous about those kinds of things. And it wasn't natural to the area, smooth and river-worn, unlike the jagged granite you find everywhere else. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it. I looked around the site, trying to find any sign of someone else. Again, nothing. That night, I locked everything. I kept a hatchet close to the bed and even left the key in the ignition just in case. Around 1:45 a.m., I woke up to tapping. Light, rhythmic tapping on the side of the RV, not the windows, the aluminum siding. I jumped out of bed and pulled the blinds. Nothing. I did a full sweep inside with a flashlight. Silence. Until I turned off the light again. That's when I heard something I will never forget. A low, guttural humming. Almost like a chant. Not loud, not in any recognizable language. Just a slow, steady vibration in the air. I could feel it more than I could hear it. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the driver's seat until the first light hit the edge of the trees. At dawn, I opened the RV door to a second stone, almost identical to the first, placed beside the first one, and next to that, a feather, grayish-black, long, probably from a raven. I didn't bother breaking down camp properly. I just drove. I didn't even eat. I drove all the way to Durango without stopping. And when I finally got a signal, I called a friend who lives in Colorado Springs. I stayed at his place for 2 nights before heading home. I tried researching folklore tied to that part of the San Juan forest. Ute legends, old mining camp superstitions, missing hiker reports. The area has its share of unexplained disappearances, but nothing that matched my experience precisely. Just scattered references to forest watchers and silent singers in obscure regional blogs. To this day, I don't know what it was. If it was a person, some deranged hermit, or something older. But I've never returned to that forest, and I never will. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't the wind. Something watched me out there. If you're thinking about solo RV camping in San Juan National Forest, just be prepared for more than you expect. Never again. I don't care what people say. Some places are just off. You can feel it in your gut. The air's still, but not peaceful. The silence isn't calm, it's watching you. That's what it was like the second I turned off the main road and drove deeper into San Juan National Forest. I was looking for quiet, but what I found was something else. This happened back in October of 2022. I'd taken a few weeks off just to get away from everything: work, people, city noise. I'd been living out of my RV for months at that point, and Colorado had always been on my list. I'd done the usual spots, Ouray, Durango, but I wanted to try somewhere more remote, somewhere with fewer people, more trees, more stars. I found a spot on an old hiking forum, just a GPS pin. No campground name, just hidden gem near Piedra River. No one around. Beautiful. That was enough for me. The drive up there was sketchy. One of those forest roads with no signs, potholes big enough to swallow your tire, and zero cell service. But eventually, I made it. I found a clearing just off a trail, surrounded by dense pines. The river was about 100 yards away. No other campers, no rangers, no sound but the breeze through the trees. Perfect, or so I thought. I parked, got set up, and cooked a late lunch. I spent that first day just walking along the river and taking pictures. The air was crisp, and the fall colors were unreal, reds and oranges glowing in the afternoon sun. That night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't loud, it was soft, like distant crunching, like boots on gravel. Then it stopped. I waited, thought maybe it was an animal, or my imagination. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Crunch, crunch, stop. It sounded like someone was walking just outside the RV, slowly circling it. I held my breath. No lights, no voices, just the sound of slow, deliberate steps. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes, it stopped. I turned on the exterior light. Nothing. I even stepped out with my flashlight. There were no prints in the dirt, no broken branches, nothing. Just cold air and silence. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just rattled. Maybe it had been a deer or an elk. I don't know. I tried to sleep. I really did. The next morning, I walked down the same trail I'd found the day before. It ran parallel to the river for a while, then forked. I followed the left path, deeper into the woods. After about an hour, I came across something strange. It was a small stack of stones. 3 rocks balanced perfectly, almost too perfectly, in the middle of the trail. I'd seen stuff like that before. Trail markers, or people doing those little spiritual things. But this one just felt intentional. It wasn't on the side. It was right in the center of the path, like it was meant to stop you. I walked around it, kept going. Maybe 20 more minutes in, I came across another one. Then another. All different sizes, all balanced perfectly. Always in the middle of the path. I turned around. As I walked back toward camp, I realized something that stopped me cold. The trail was different. I swear to you, I had followed the same path. But now, it was curving in directions I didn't remember. Some of the trees looked different. I turned around again, then again, trying to figure out which way I came from. That's when I saw it. Another stack of rocks, freshly made, about 20 feet behind me. I hadn't seen it before. And there were footprints in the dirt, not mine, barefoot. That's when the anxiety hit me. I don't panic easily, but something was seriously wrong. I started backtracking as fast as I could, heart racing, looking for any sign of where I'd come from. Eventually, thank God, I found the river. I followed it upstream and finally made it back to camp. But here's where things got even stranger. When I got back to the RV, the door was unlatched. Not open, but not locked. I always lock my rig, especially when I'm alone. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for one thing. There was dirt on the floor, a small pile of it right by the steps. No tracks, no pattern. Just a single pile of forest dirt, like someone had brought it in and dumped it there on purpose. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the driver's seat with a flashlight in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, just waiting, listening. At 3:14 a.m., I remember the time exactly. My headlights flicked on. I hadn't touched anything. I hadn't even started the engine. My headlights just turned on by themselves. I rushed outside, heart hammering, but the moment I opened the door, they went off. Darkness again. I checked the battery, the switches, everything. No issues, no one around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. I left the next morning, didn't even finish breakfast. I threw everything into the cabinets, locked the rig, and took off. As I was pulling away from the campsite, I looked in the rearview mirror. There was a person standing at the tree line. Not a ranger, not a hiker, just a tall, thin figure in dark clothes. No movement, no waving. Just watching me drive away. I blinked, and they were gone. I didn't stop until I reached a Walmart parking lot in Durango. I slept there with my keys in the ignition. I haven't gone back to that part of San Juan since. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed one more night. Or if I'd followed those rock stacks deeper into the woods. Now, when people ask me about the scariest place I've ever camped, I don't hesitate. San Juan National Forest. I never used to believe in weird forest stories. Ghosts, spirits, shadow people. I always thought it was just internet nonsense. Creepypasta stuff. But after what happened to me in San Juan National Forest, I don't laugh at those stories anymore. This happened in early June 2023. I was traveling solo in my RV, doing a loop through southern Colorado. I'd been staying at some campgrounds near Pagosa Springs, but I wanted something quieter, off-grid. I found a dispersed camping spot way up in the forest, not far from Williams Creek Reservoir. The place was beautiful, flat spot for the RV, surrounded by trees, and best of all, no one else in sight. No tents, no trailers, nothing. Just me and the forest. I even had a little fire pit left over from a previous camper. Looked perfect. The first 2 days were peaceful. I hiked, read, cooked, even sat by the campfire and just listened to the wind in the trees. It was the kind of silence you only get deep in the woods, where even your own breath feels too loud. But things started getting weird on the third night. I was sitting by the fire, maybe around 10 p.m. It had gotten real dark. No moon that night, just thick clouds and the smell of pine smoke. That's when I noticed something. A faint light up in the trees. At first, I thought it was lightning, but it wasn't flickering. It was steady, almost like a lantern or a glowing orb, about 20 feet off the ground, maybe 50 yards into the woods. I stared at it for a good minute, trying to make sense of it. Then it moved. Not fell, moved. Slowly, sideways, drifting between the trees. No sound, no wind. Just that silent, glowing light floating deeper into the forest. I got chills instantly. I stood up, holding my flashlight, but I didn't chase it. Something told me not to. Eventually, it faded away behind the trees. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the image. A light floating up where no person could walk. The next morning, I told myself it had to be someone with a drone, or maybe headlights bouncing weird off the trees. I was trying to be rational, but deep down, I knew better. Later that afternoon, I decided to explore a bit around camp. I found a narrow trail that curved behind a small ridge, and I followed it, hoping to find a view or a stream. Instead, I found a circle of stones. It was in a clearing maybe 10 minutes from camp, just a ring of mossy rocks, maybe 8 feet across. Inside the circle, the grass was yellowed and dead, like it hadn't been touched by sunlight. In the center sat a wooden carving, some kind of totem about 2 feet tall, looked hand-carved. A face on it, but no eyes. Just hollow sockets. I didn't touch it. I didn't even walk into the circle. I just backed away and left. That night, I kept every light in the RV on. At 2:27 a.m., again, I remembered the exact time. I was woken up by thumping on the roof. Not light tapping, thudding, like someone crawling up there with their hands and knees. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed outside. Nothing. The RV roof was empty. I checked the ladder, dusty, undisturbed. No tracks around the RV, no animals. And the woods were completely silent. When I got back inside, I noticed something else. The clock on the stove was flashing. The power had reset, like there'd been a surge. But everything else in the RV was fine. Lights, battery. Nothing else was affected. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat at the table with the blinds closed, feeling like I was being watched. The final straw came the next evening. I was sitting outside around sunset, just trying to enjoy one last meal before packing up and leaving early the next morning. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Not in my head, not in my imagination. It came from the woods behind me. At first, I thought it was wind, but the trees weren't moving. The fire wasn't flickering. The air was still. And yet, I heard it again. This time it was clearer. Come see. I spun around with my flashlight scanning the trees. Nothing. But the light, the same orb from the other night, was there again, floating between the branches. This time, closer. Maybe 20 feet away, motionless. Then it blinked out. I grabbed my keys and ran inside the RV. Didn't brush my teeth, didn't wash my dishes. I turned that engine over and backed out of that campsite like I was fleeing a crime scene. I drove 2 hours in the dark just to sleep in a gas station parking lot. I've never gone back to that area, never will. The crazy thing is, when I posted about this on a camping forum, someone messaged me privately and said, "You saw the lights too?" I still get goosebumps every time I talk about this. It's been over a year, but there's a part of me that feels like whatever I experienced in that forest never really let me go. It started in mid-September 2022. I had taken some time off work to disconnect, reset mentally. Life had been hectic, too many screens, too much stress. So I figured, why not disappear into nature for a week or two? I drove into southwestern Colorado, toward San Juan National Forest, hoping for quiet. I found a semi-remote site about 30 minutes from the town of Dolores. No cell signal, which was perfect. It was a pull-through spot just off a gravel forest road, surrounded by dense pine and aspen trees. I parked my RV, leveled it out, and just exhaled. Finally, peace. For the first couple of days, I hiked, journaled, made coffee over the fire, and just sat in silence. At night, I'd listen to the crackle of the fire with a blanket over my shoulders, soaking in the kind of solitude you can only find deep in the woods. But on the fourth night, something changed. I went to bed early, around 9:30 p.m. I had just shut off the RV lights and was lying in bed, reading on my Kindle when I heard it. 3 knocks, slow, heavy, on the back of my RV. Now, this spot was miles from the next camper. I hadn't seen a single soul in days. I froze, Kindle still in my hands, pulse thudding in my ears. I waited, listened, nothing. I finally whispered to myself. Probably a branch fell, but then it happened again. This time on the side of the RV. Not hard, not frantic, just deliberate, like someone was making sure I knew they were out there. I flipped on the lights, grabbed my flashlight, and opened the door. Nothing. No wind, no animals scurrying, just cold air and thick trees. I didn't sleep much that night. The knocking didn't come again, but I left the light on and kept a hatchet under my pillow, just in case. The next morning, I walked around the RV looking for tracks. If it was a bear or some animal, I'd see prints. But the ground was soft from rain the day before. Any prints would have shown up. There was nothing. Not even my own footprints from the night before. I almost packed up and left. But I told myself, you're just being paranoid. You wanted nature, and now you're jumping at shadows. So I stayed. The next night it was quiet again. No knocks, no strange sounds. I started to feel silly for being so paranoid, but the fifth night is when everything really went downhill. It was around 1 a.m. when I woke up. Not to a sound, but to a feeling, like something was watching me. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. And then I heard it. A whisper, clear as day, from just outside the RV, come out. I froze, didn't move. My eyes were locked on the window near the bed, but it was fogged up from my breath in the cool air. I couldn't see anything. Then came the knock again, just once this time, right beneath the window. I held my breath and waited, and waited. I must have sat there for an hour, frozen in place. Eventually, I passed out from pure exhaustion. The next morning, I opened the RV door slowly, expecting, I don't know, something, a dead animal, a person, a note. Instead, I found 3 long parallel scratches on the door, deep, clean, too wide for a person's hand, too deliberate to be random damage. That was it. I was done. I packed up that morning and drove straight out of the forest, didn't even stop to make breakfast. My plan was to hit a campground with other people, maybe even a small town with some traffic. I ended up at a paid campsite in Durango that night. I was parked in a well-lit lot with maybe 10 other RVs. I finally felt safe. But at 3:04 a.m., I woke up again, on the side of the RV, followed by the same whisper. Closer this time. Come out. That's when I realized something I had never even considered before. Whatever had followed me from the forest wasn't tied to the trees. I left Colorado the next day, haven't RV'd alone since. This story still messes with my head because I don't think I'll ever understand what really happened. It's not something I talk about often, but when I do, people either get super quiet or they just walk away. This was in late August 2023. I had been RVing across Colorado for a few weeks, bouncing between campgrounds, national forest land, and the occasional Walmart parking lot. But one spot stuck with me, for all the wrong reasons. I had just left Silverton and was looking for somewhere peaceful to spend a couple nights. I found a Forest Service road that led me deep into the San Juan National Forest, about an hour from the nearest town. The trees were thick, the trail was rough, and there was zero signal, which at the time sounded perfect. After about 30 minutes of slow driving on that dirt road, I found a wide pull-off area just big enough for my RV. There were no other campers in sight. I felt lucky. The place was beautiful, like one of those Colorado postcards. Thick pine trees, patches of sunlight, and nothing but silence. I parked, set up my little outdoor table, and spent the first night enjoying the solitude. Stars were insane. No light pollution. I stayed up late, just sitting by my fire, sipping tea, and watching the sky. But the second night is when it happened. I remember I had dinner around 7 p.m. Simple stuff, canned chili and cornbread I warmed up on the stove. Around 8:30, I got this sudden wave of exhaustion, like not just tired, drained, like someone flipped a switch. I told myself I probably just needed rest after hiking all day. So I brushed my teeth, shut off the lights, and climbed into bed. Now, here's the thing. I never sleep more than 6 hours straight. I'm a light sleeper. I usually wake up once or twice in the night to use the bathroom or check the time. But that night, I didn't. I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was how bright it was inside the RV. Sunlight. I rolled over to check the time on the stove clock. 2:43 p.m. I shot out of bed, confused and sweating. I had slept through the entire night and most of the next day. That had never happened to me before, especially not while camping. I checked my phone. It was off. Not dead, just powered off. I never turn it off. Then I noticed something weird. My boots were muddy. Sitting right by the door, soaked and caked with reddish dirt and pine needles. But it hadn't rained. Not even dew that morning. The ground around my RV was completely dry. Even stranger, my flashlight was on the passenger seat of the RV. I usually leave it by the door. I hadn't touched it since the night before. So now I'm standing there, heart racing, trying to piece together what the hell happened between 8:30 p.m. and 2:43 p.m. the next day. Did I sleepwalk? Did I go outside and not remember? I stepped out of the RV to clear my head. And that's when I saw it. A footprint, just one. Right behind my RV, not mine. Too large, too deep and barefoot. You could see every toe, almost like it had been burned into the soil. It pointed toward the trees and then just vanished. No trail, no other prints. That's when the silence hit me. You know how forests have background noise? Birds, bugs, wind? This place had none of that. Just dead silence. It was like everything had gone into hiding. I stayed one more night, mostly because I was too shaken to drive. But that night I didn't sleep. I sat in the driver's seat with every curtain drawn and the flashlight in my lap. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anything. But at exactly 2:43 a.m., my phone powered on by itself. Battery at 82%. No apps open, just a lock screen, and one missed call from an unknown number. No area code, just 6 digits. 000143. I left at first light. Since then, I've tried to research that area, thinking maybe I camped near some weird magnetic anomaly or old military zone. But nothing comes up. The only thing I did find was a Reddit post from a guy who said he camped somewhere near Dolores and lost a whole day. He woke up with dirty boots and a nosebleed. His post ended with the words, "San Juan took something from me. I just don't know what." People always ask me why I stopped solo RV camping. I used to love it. The freedom, the quiet, the escape. But after what happened to me last fall in the San Juan National Forest, I don't go anywhere alone anymore. That place changed me. And not in a poetic way. Something about those woods left a mark that I can't shake. It was October 2023. I remember that because the leaves were at peak color, deep oranges and burning reds. I had just finished a project early and decided to reward myself with a week in nature. I picked San Juan because I'd heard it was peaceful, beautiful, and less crowded in the fall. Sounded perfect. I packed up my RV and I headed out. After a couple hours of driving down forest roads, I found the kind of spot I always looked for. Isolated, flat, with a small clearing just big enough to pull in and set up. Thick woods all around. No other campers. Not a single car had passed in hours. It was exactly what I needed. The first 2 days were perfect. Hikes during the day, reading by the fire at night. I even set up my hammock between 2 tall pines. There was no signal, no distractions, just the sounds of wind, distant birds, and the occasional crack of twigs from deer moving through the brush. But then the weirdness started. Night 3, I heard what I thought was singing. Around 2 a.m., very faint. It was so soft I almost thought I was imagining it. A woman's voice, humming or whispering a melody I didn't recognize. It drifted through the trees like smoke. There, one moment, gone the next. I sat up in bed, held my breath, and listened. It came and went for about 10 minutes, then faded completely. The next morning, I figured maybe it was just wind or my brain playing tricks on me. I tried to laugh it off, but then I found something near my fire pit. A pine cone wrapped in black thread with a small feather tied to the top. Sitting dead center on a rock I'd used to prop up my cooking grate. I hadn't put it there. No animal could have arranged something like that. I stared at it for a long time, trying to rationalize it. Was someone messing with me? A hunter? A hiker? But why would anyone come miles into the forest just to leave some creepy forest craft in the middle of the night? I tossed it into the woods and tried to shake it off. That night I didn't light a fire. I stayed inside the RV with all the curtains drawn. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, but something felt off. The forest didn't feel calm anymore. It felt like it was holding its breath. Around midnight, I heard the singing again. This time it was louder, closer, a slow, breathy lullaby. No words, just a soft, eerie humming. Then came the knock on the side of the RV, not aggressive, not even loud, just deliberate. Knock, knock. I held still, didn't even blink. I had my flashlight in one hand, my knife in the other, then silence. I stayed like that for what felt like hours until I eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, I was done. I was going to pack up and leave, but when I stepped outside, I found footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, small, child-sized, leading from the woods to my RV, then stopping. No return prints. And hanging from my driver's side mirror was a little bundle of twigs, tied with the same black thread I had seen the day before. That's when I remembered something a ranger told me once, back in Oregon. He said, if you ever find little totems or bundles in the woods, especially tied with black thread or hair, don't disturb them. Leave them exactly where they are. I had thrown the first one, disrespected it. So I didn't touch the new one. I packed as fast as I could and hit the road. Here's the part that still haunts me. About 20 minutes down the forest road, my GPS suddenly turned back on. I hadn't had signal in days, but now it flickered to life and showed a waypoint marker in the exact spot I had camped. A waypoint I never placed. Labeled, "Don't forget." I've never gone back to San Juan since, and I never RV alone anymore. This is the story I never thought I'd share. Not because I'm scared people won't believe me. Honestly, I don't care about that anymore. It's because even talking about it makes my skin crawl. It happened in September 2023, during what was supposed to be a relaxing solo RV trip through the Southwest. I had already hit a few national parks and was headed north through Colorado. A guy I met in a campground near Durango told me, "You want solitude? Go find this old Forest Service road near Piedra. It's off the beaten path. Nobody goes there anymore." He said it like a tip. Now, I wonder if it was a warning. I found the road after some backtracking. It wasn't marked on any of my usual maps, just a gravel path half eaten by grass and roots. Looked like no one had driven down it in years. But I trusted my instincts and followed it about 5 miles into the forest until I came upon a clearing. And there it was, an old ranger station, weather-beaten, roof sagging, one window busted, the other boarded. Looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The sign, hanging off a single rusty chain, read, Crescent Gulch Fire Lookout, established 1947. It looked straight out of a ghost story, but something about it fascinated me. So I parked my RV nearby and decided I'd spend the night. My plan was to check out the station the next morning, maybe take a few photos and move on. But plans don't mean much in San Juan. That night was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no night birds. Around midnight, I started hearing it. A metallic creaking, like an old screen door swaying in the wind. I thought maybe the ranger station had one, and maybe a breeze had picked up. But when I opened the door and stepped out with my flashlight, everything was still. Then I noticed the door to the station was open, wide open. Now, when I first pulled in, I remember clearly, it was closed. The latch was hanging, but the door was shut. I even took a photo of it earlier, planning to post it later with a caption like, "Spooky spot for the night." I closed the RV door and locked it. I told myself it was probably an animal, a bear or raccoon. I didn't want to admit the truth bubbling inside me. I was being watched. I barely slept. When I did finally drift off, I dreamed of a man standing in a tower, watching the forest burn, refusing to leave. I woke up sweating just before dawn. That morning, I made coffee and forced myself to go check out the station before leaving. I told myself I had to know what was in there, even if it was just old trash and broken furniture. Inside, the station was mostly empty. Smelled like rot and something musty. There was an old desk flipped on its side, a shattered chair, and a filing cabinet that had been emptied and tipped over. But on the back wall was a map of the San Juan National Forest, marked with tiny red pins. There were dozens of them scattered across the region. Most had little tags with handwritten years. 1962, 1974, 1989, 2006. But the one closest to where I had camped was labeled 2023. The question mark looked recent, like someone added it not long ago. Underneath the map was a logbook, half molded and falling apart. I flipped through a few entries. The writing got worse the farther I went back, but they all said the same kind of stuff. Smoke spotted northeast, 3 miles. Unusual lights near Pine Ridge. One hiker missing near trail 238. Do not engage. Let the forest take it. What the hell did that mean? The last page had just one line, scrawled in heavy, shaking handwriting. It's still here. I don't know why I did it, but I took a photo of that page, just instinct. I turned to leave, heart pounding, and that's when I heard a footstep behind the building. Just one, then another, and then a low groaning sound, almost human, almost suffocating. I bolted, full sprint to the RV, jumped in, slammed the door shut. Through the rearview mirror, I saw it, just for a second. A figure standing in the tree line, tall, thin, wearing what looked like a forest ranger's jacket. But the face was wrong. It was pale, featureless, almost stretched, like someone had pulled a skin-colored sheet over a skull. I floored it down the road, branches scraping the sides of the RV. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. I deleted the photo of the logbook later that night. Not because it scared me, but because the words started changing when I looked at it. The line no longer said, "It's still here." Now it read, "You brought it with you." I never found any official record of Crescent Gulch Station. No coordinates, no historical photos, nothing. It's like it never existed, but I remember it. And every few nights when I can't sleep, I still hear that metallic creaking, like a door swinging gently, just waiting for me to come back. I've told people about this before, and they always look at me like I'm making it up. Some even laugh, but I can still smell the pine smoke, still feel the cold sweat that covered me that night. And I haven't set foot in the San Juan National Forest since. This happened in May 2022. I had just finished a contract job in Phoenix and decided to reward myself with a solo RV trip. Nothing fancy, just a couple weeks off the grid. No Wi-Fi, no people, just nature and silence. I had driven through Colorado before, but never camped in San Juan. I remember reading an article that called it one of America's most untouched wildernesses. That sounded perfect. I ended up near Piedra Creek, a lesser-known area off County Road 631. I followed an old logging road that snaked up a ridge and found the most peaceful spot I'd ever seen. High above the trees with a view of the valley, wildflowers everywhere, and not a soul in sight. I parked my RV, set up a fire pit, and planned to stay 3 days. That was the plan. I hiked the nearby ridge trail, fished a little, and made a small campfire that night. There was no cell signal, but I downloaded a bunch of audiobooks and planned to write in my travel journal. I slept like a baby. But around 5 a.m., I woke up to a weird sound. Not an animal, not wind. It sounded like someone whispering. I sat up in bed, confused. The whisper was faint, like it was coming from just outside the RV. No words, just the sound of breathing and murmuring. By the time I got up and looked, there was nothing there. Just trees and silence. I chalked it up to a dream. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe my audiobook had kicked on accidentally. That afternoon, I was out walking along the creek when I saw something that stopped me cold. Across the water, in the shade of some aspen trees, stood a man, just standing there. He was wearing an old denim jacket, arms at his sides. He wasn't doing anything, not waving, not moving, just watching. I shouted, "Hey," thinking maybe he needed help. He didn't respond. I turned around to cross the log bridge back to the other side, but when I looked up again, he was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just vanished. I got back to my RV, locked the doors, and stayed inside. Didn't even light a fire that night. And then, around midnight, I started hearing the whispers again. This time, they were circling the RV. I could hear them move, low voices, some deeper, some higher, like multiple people just out of view, mumbling nonsense. Every now and then, I heard soft tapping on the side paneling. Not banging, not knocking, just fingertips. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed the tire iron I keep under my seat and waited it out. Somehow, I fell asleep around 3 a.m. I was ready to leave that morning, but the logging road had flooded. A storm had moved in overnight and washed out the trail. I'd have to wait for the water to go down. So I packed a bag and followed a game trail east, thinking I could find a shortcut to town, or at least a ridge with a signal. That's when I found the cabin. Old, rotten, half sunken into the earth. Looked like it had been abandoned for 50 years. But what struck me was how deliberate it was hidden, tucked between thick trees, covered in moss and vines. If I hadn't almost tripped over a rusted metal tool, I wouldn't have seen it. I went inside. It was empty, except for 2 things. 1, a pile of boots in the corner, all mismatched. Different sizes, old, newer, some children's. 2, and a map nailed to the wall. A hand-drawn sketch of the area, with dozens of X's marked. One of them was directly over the spot where I had camped. I felt ice in my chest. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Fast. heavy, cracking twigs and leaves. I bolted out the cabin and ran back down the trail. Didn't look back. I didn't care if I fell or broke an ankle. I just needed to reach my RV. When I got there, something was waiting for me. There was a pile of rocks stacked in a perfect pyramid next to the RV door. On top sat one of my boots, but I hadn't taken my boots off. That means someone had gone inside. I left everything. Slammed the RV into reverse, scraped the bumper on a stump, and drove through the shallow part of the flood, nearly stalling the engine. Didn't stop driving until I hit Pagosa Springs. I filed a report with the local sheriff. He didn't seem surprised, just said, "Lots of strange things up there. You're lucky you made it down." Later, I looked up the area. Apparently, there's a local legend about the Creek Watchers, a group of recluses or spirits who take people who stay too long in the forest. People disappear up there every year, usually written off as hikers getting lost, but they always leave their boots behind, just like the pile in the cabin, just like the one left at my door. I still have that travel journal. That trip was the last entry I ever wrote. All it says is, "Don't stay more than 2 nights." They say, when you go out into nature, you're supposed to feel peace. That the deeper you go into the woods, the quieter your thoughts become. I believed that once. But something changed after my experience in the San Juan National Forest. I still find myself thinking about it, especially at night when everything goes still and the silence outside my window becomes just a little too heavy. This happened in early October 2021, right before the snow started settling in the higher elevations. I had been living and working remotely out of my RV for over a year by that point, traveling, camping, staying in forest land and BLM spots. It was a lifestyle I loved. Freedom, simplicity, and a constant connection with nature. That fall, I decided to head into Colorado before making my way back south for winter. I'd read about the San Juan National Forest and how it was less touristy than other places. I wanted solitude. That's exactly what I got, just not the kind I was expecting. I arrived near a place called Beaver Meadows, northeast of Dolores. I had found a spot down a rough dirt road, the kind where you can drive for a solid 30 minutes and not see a single soul. That's what I was after. Just me, the trees, and my little home on wheels. The site was perfect. Tall pines, a fire ring, and even a small stream nearby. I parked, leveled the rig, and set up for what I thought would be a quiet 5-day stay. The first day was beautiful. The colors were just starting to change, and the cold hadn't fully settled in yet. I chopped some wood, made a fire, cooked dinner, and watched the stars. The kind of night where you feel grateful to be alive. I remember thinking, this is what it's all about. That night, just before drifting off, I heard a faint scraping sound outside. It was light, like something brushing against the side of the RV. I assumed it was a tree branch or maybe a raccoon. I didn't even get out of bed. I was used to critters poking around. The next morning, I stepped outside and immediately noticed something odd. Several small piles of pine cones arranged in a perfect line leading from the woods directly toward my RV door. Each pile had exactly 3 pine cones stacked neatly. I stood there for a long moment, just staring. I hadn't put them there. No wind or animal could have done it with that kind of precision. It was just strange. I took a photo, kicked them aside, and went about my day. But I couldn't shake the unease. That night, I kept my outdoor lights on and stayed alert. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard the scraping again. This time it was more deliberate, slow, and rhythmic. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I reached over and grabbed my flashlight and a camp knife. then crept toward the door. The moment I opened it and shined the light outside, the sound stopped. Nothing was there. Just trees, the fog of my own breath in the cold, and an overwhelming stillness that didn't feel natural. I stepped outside for just a moment, scanned the area, then went back in and locked everything. That night, I barely slept. The following day, things got weirder. I went for a short hike up the trail behind the RV, maybe half a mile in. On my way back, I passed a tree with something hanging from one of the lower branches. It was a bundle of twigs, tied together with what looked like animal sinew or old leather, and shaped almost like a crude human figure. At first, I thought it was some kind of geocaching thing, or maybe a prank, but it felt old, wrong. I left it alone, but I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder more than once on the way back down. When I returned, there were more pine cone piles. This time, inside the fire ring, arranged in a spiral. I stood there, jaw clenched, breathing hard. Someone had been at my camp again. I checked my trail cam, one I had mounted the day before as a precaution, and it had been ripped clean off the tree and was nowhere to be found. By now, I was freaked out. I considered packing up right then, but it was already late afternoon and the forest road wasn't safe to drive in the dark. I locked everything up tight, built a roaring fire, and kept my hatchet close. I didn't go inside the RV until the fire had died down to embers. It was maybe 3 a.m. when I was jolted awake. The RV was rocking, not shaking like an earthquake, but swaying, gently at first, then harder, like someone was pushing it from the outside. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and grabbed the knife. My lights were off. I don't remember turning them off. I reached for the switch. Nothing. No power. I pulled back the curtain just a little and looked outside. There was someone standing at the tree line. No flashlight, no visible features. Just a tall, unmoving figure watching me. The sway stopped. The forest went dead silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. I didn't move, didn't blink, I just stared, and then, slowly, it took a step forward. That's when I dove for the keys and started the engine. It cranked painfully slow, like something was draining the battery. On the third attempt, it finally roared to life. I didn't bother disconnecting the water line or packing up anything. I just drove, bounced over rocks, clipped a small tree, and didn't stop until I hit a paved road. By the time I got to Dolores, it was sunrise. I pulled into a gas station and just sat there, hands shaking. When I finally went to check the outside of the RV, I noticed deep scratch marks along the back paneling. Long, vertical gouges, like something had raked claws or a blade down the side. And on the rear window, just barely visible in the morning dew, were 3 small pine cones, placed perfectly in a row. I didn't report it. What was I going to say? That a forest phantom shook my RV and left me pine cone messages? I kept driving that day, and I never looked back. Never returned to that part of Colorado, and even now, years later, I refuse to camp more than 2 nights in the same spot. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and check the windows, because I know there's something out there, and it knows I know. It was early spring when I made my way to San Juan National Forest. The kind of trip you take when you've been cooped up too long and need to get away from everything. Work, stress, people. I had an old RV, not the fanciest, but it had everything I needed. A bed, stove, a few books, and plenty of space for a couple of weeks of solitude. I had been hearing about the San Juan area for years. I'd seen photos of the towering pines, the flowing creeks, the wildlife. Perfect for someone like me who craved both wilderness and quiet. I was looking for peace, but instead I found something much darker. I arrived in late March, the weather still cool and unpredictable. The higher up you went in the forest, the more snow there was, but down at the base, the roads were clear. I parked my RV near a secluded creek, far from the nearest trailhead or campsite. It was a dead-end logging road with barely any traffic. Perfect. The first day, I did what anyone does when they find a quiet place. I hiked. The sun shone bright, the air was crisp, and the only sounds I heard were the calls of birds and the rustling of leaves. I wandered along the creek, took some pictures, and found a decent spot to sit and just breathe. But that evening, when I got back to the RV, things started feeling off. As I cooked my dinner, I noticed something in the distance, standing on the ridge. At first, I thought it was a person, maybe another hiker. But when I focused on it through the binoculars, I realized it was a figure. Too still, too rigid, and standing too far away to be anything human. I brushed it off. My mind was probably just playing tricks on me, and the isolation was starting to mess with my head. I locked up the RV, turned on some music, and went to bed. The night was quiet but not peaceful. I couldn't quite shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Around 3 a.m., I woke up. It wasn't from any loud noise or sudden movement, just a feeling. My heart raced. I looked around the small RV cabin, half expecting to see something out of the corner of my eye. But nothing. I forced myself back to sleep. The next day, I decided to leave the RV for a while and take a longer hike. There were miles of trails here, and I wanted to explore the more remote areas. I packed a small bag and set out, feeling slightly better after a night of restless sleep. I must have walked for hours before I found something that made my stomach drop. Tucked deep in the woods, I came across an abandoned cabin. It looked old, like really old. Weathered wood, moss growing on the roof, windows darkened by years of neglect. But what struck me the most was the smell, an awful, rotting smell that seemed to seep from the foundation itself. I thought about going inside. Curiosity was always my downfall, but something told me to stay away. Instead, I walked around it, and that's when I saw it. A pile of animal skulls stacked on top of a rotting log near the back door. There were at least a dozen, their empty eyes staring back at me. I froze. There was something so unsettling about it, like the place had been used for something wrong. That's when I heard it. A creaking sound coming from inside the cabin, like someone or something was moving around in there. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the door. It was slightly ajar, like it had been disturbed recently. The thought of someone being inside made my skin crawl. I didn't stick around. I turned on my heel and made my way back to the RV, this time walking faster than I'd ever walked before. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the forest around me felt like it was closing in. I was desperate to get back to the safety of my RV. I didn't know why, but I felt like I was being watched. When I got back, everything seemed normal. The RV was still where I left it, but there was something different, something I couldn't put my finger on. I was on edge, but I tried to relax. I made dinner, read a little, and turned in for the night, locking every door and window. The fire outside crackled, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe again. That night, though, I couldn't shake the unease. I kept waking up, hearing what sounded like footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. But every time I checked, there was nothing there. It was so quiet, too quiet. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard a noise I'll never forget. It was a soft knock, 3 taps, on the RV door. I stood frozen for what felt like forever. There was no one out there, I was certain of it. I had locked everything up tight, and no one could have gotten close without me hearing it. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed the nearest thing to defend myself, a heavy flashlight, and made my way to the door. But before I could reach it, I heard something scraping at the side of the RV, as if something was dragging itself along the metal, slow and steady. I opened the door in a rush. Nothing. No sign of anyone. But there were footprints in the mud outside, leading off toward the creek. They were too deep, too large to be human, and they were unmistakably fresh. I didn't waste another second. I jumped in the driver's seat, started the engine, and hit the gas. I didn't care that I didn't know the way out. I just needed to get away from whatever was out there. The further I drove, the more I noticed the odd shapes in the trees, the unnatural stillness of the forest. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. I finally made it back to the main road by sunrise, and as I looked in the rearview mirror, I could have sworn I saw something standing in the trees, watching me. I didn't stop, I just kept driving. I haven't gone back to the San Juan National Forest since, and I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear those knocks. I can still hear that scraping sound on the side of the RV, like something, or someone, is still waiting for me out there. It had been a long, grueling week. The kind of week where the weight of the world felt like it was pressing down on your shoulders, suffocating you. That's why I decided to pack up my RV and head into the wilderness. I'd been on the road for months, living the nomadic life, but the past few weeks had been more chaotic than usual. So, when I found a secluded spot in the San Juan National Forest near Cortez, I thought it was exactly what I needed. Just some time alone to reset. I arrived in the late afternoon, just as the sun began to dip below the peaks of the distant mountains. The air was cool, but not cold. It was perfect. I set up camp near a clearing by a creek, the sound of water trickling over rocks providing a natural soundtrack to the quiet stillness of the forest. I was alone, just the way I wanted it. I spent the evening cooking a simple meal, reading a book by the campfire, and watching the stars come out. It felt good to be out there, away from the noise of the world. The only company I had was the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant hoot of an owl, the kind of night you can't get in the city. But as the night wore on, the peace began to feel a little too peaceful. I remember the moment when things started to feel off. It was around 11:30 p.m. I was sitting inside the RV, reading, when I heard it. A faint knock on the side of the RV. I froze. I had been outside earlier, checking the campfire and the perimeter of the RV, and there had been no one around. No signs of animals or any other campers nearby, but here it was, a knock. I dismissed it as a tree branch brushing against the side of the RV. It happens, right? The wind can move things in strange ways. I tried to get back to my book, but then I heard it again. A knock, this time louder. And then, after a brief pause, a scratching sound, like something dragging across metal. Now, I wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but I had a bad feeling. I grabbed the flashlight and went outside, cautiously. The air was so still that the moment I stepped out, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. There wasn't a sound, not even a rustling leaf. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating nothing but trees, shadows, and the faint glow of the fire. I circled the RV, shining the light around. Nothing seemed out of place. No animals, no human figures. Just the usual eerie silence that comes with being deep in the woods at night. But as I rounded the back of the RV, I noticed something strange, a small pile of dirt. I hadn't seen it before, and as I knelt down to get a closer look, I realized something unsettling. The dirt was fresh, and it was piled in a perfect circle, like something had been buried or disturbed recently. I quickly stood up, heart racing. My flashlight flicked around the campsite, searching for any signs of movement, any clues. But everything was still. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was nearby, watching me. I hurried back inside the RV, locked the door, and sat on the couch, trying to calm my nerves. I figured I was just tired and overthinking things. It happens when you're out in the wilderness alone. The mind can play tricks on you, make you hear things that aren't there. I tried to shake it off and go to sleep, but every creak, every groan of the RV made me jump. My eyes stayed wide open as I listened to the silence outside. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a loud bang. It sounded like something hitting the side of the RV. I shot up, heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight, slowly opening the door, my mind racing. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw it. A shadow moving near the edge of the clearing. It was tall, far too tall to be human, and it moved with a strange, jerky motion, almost like it was dragging itself through the forest. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and started the engine. The RV roared to life, and I threw it into gear, tearing down the dirt road. My hands were shaking, my eyes darting from the rearview mirror to the winding path ahead. I drove fast, faster than I should have, not caring about the bumps in the road or the possibility of hitting a rock. I just needed to get out of there. But the further I went, the more I could feel that something was following me. I glanced back, and for a brief moment I saw it, the figure, standing at the edge of the road, watching me as I sped away. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town hours later. I parked at a gas station, heart still racing, and sat there in silence, trying to make sense of what had happened. But I couldn't. There was no explanation for the knocks, the scratching, or the figure I had seen in the woods. When I finally got out of the RV to stretch my legs, I noticed something strange. 3 small pine cones, placed carefully on the windshield, as if someone had left a message for me. I didn't want to touch them. I didn't want to know what they meant. I haven't gone back to the San Juan National Forest since that night. The whole experience left me shaken, and every time I think about it, I feel that same sense of unease creeping back. Maybe it was a trick of the mind, maybe it wasn't. But I know one thing for sure. There are things out there in those woods that I'll never understand. And I'm not sure I ever want to. I've been living in an RV full-time for nearly 2 years now. I've seen a lot, been through a lot, but nothing prepared me for what happened that week in the San Juan National Forest. I never planned to tell anyone, but I figure if you're ever thinking of camping deep in those woods alone, you should probably hear this. It all started on a Tuesday. I was heading north out of Durango, Colorado, and I wanted to spend a few days completely off-grid. No phone signal, no internet, no traffic, no people. Just me, my rig, and the wild. I found a remote spot up in the forest, near a creek and tucked deep between the trees. No one else was around, not a soul. It was perfect. Or at least, I thought it was. I set up camp, took in the view, and settled in. The first night was normal, a bit chilly but peaceful. I cooked some food, read a little, and then fell asleep listening to the soft sounds of the creek outside. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up in a sweat. No dream, no noise, just this feeling, like I wasn't alone. I turned on the RV lights and peered out the windows. Nothing. Darkness, forest, silence. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I'd camped solo plenty of times before. It was just the isolation getting to me. But the next day, while hiking a short trail nearby, I came across something that made my stomach drop. It was a tree, about 20 feet off the trail, and carved into the trunk were symbols. Not initials, not doodles, but something else. I don't know how to describe them. Just strange, angular shapes, almost like runes. And they were fresh. The bark was still moist where it had been cut. I don't usually spook easy, but I took a picture, turned around, and headed straight back to the RV. That night, the woods changed. Everything was too quiet. No insects, no wind, no creek, just silence. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, crunching the gravel near my fire pit. I grabbed my flashlight and my bear spray, quietly slid the curtain open and looked out. Nothing. But the footsteps kept going, around the RV, like someone circling. When I finally burst out with the flashlight, no one was there, not a thing. No animals running off, no signs of anyone. Just my fire pit, still smoldering from earlier, and darkness beyond the trees. I felt watched. I could feel it deep in my chest. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I noticed muddy prints on the rear of my RV, bare feet, human. And not just one set, 2, maybe 3. I packed up and drove deeper into town, thinking maybe I'd just camp at a real campground for the night. But when I got to the main road, my GPS wouldn't work. My phone was dead, no signal. And when I pulled over to check my paper map, I realized something wasn't right. The road I was on wasn't on the map. Now I know this forest is massive, and it's not uncommon for smaller paths to be unmapped. But I had marked where I turned off, and this path didn't exist on anything. No markers, no signs, no trail name. I'd been driving for 20 minutes, and it just kept winding, deeper and deeper into the trees. I was about to turn around when I saw a cabin, hidden, dark, and completely out of place. I stopped. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but something about it felt wrong. Like it didn't belong there, or maybe I didn't go inside. I just kept driving until I found a narrow fork that eventually led me back to the original clearing where I had first parked. When I got back, I saw something waiting on the picnic table. It was my photo, the one I took of the carved tree. Printed. Sitting there like someone had developed it and left it as a message. I don't even have a printer in my RV. I didn't even stop to think. I grabbed my gear, threw it all in the RV, started the engine, and drove. I didn't care about my fuel, didn't care about damaging the undercarriage. I just knew I had to get out. When I finally got to cell signal hours later, I checked my phone gallery. The photo of the carved symbols was gone. Just deleted. And the folder it had been in was corrupted. Since then, I haven't camped alone in the San Juan National Forest. I won't. Whatever I ran into up there, it wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a prank. It felt like the woods themselves didn't want me there. And I swear, something followed me. I still wake up some nights thinking I hear that same crunch of footsteps outside the RV. So if you ever go up there, be careful. Especially near the creek. Not everything in the forest is meant to be found. I've only talked about this once before, and even then, I didn't tell the full story. Not because I'm scared people won't believe me, but because it still messes with my head. I spent 1 week in the San Juan National Forest that changed the way I see the outdoors. I used to love being deep in the woods, away from everything, surrounded by nature. Now, I think twice every time I park somewhere too quiet. It was early October, right before the weather really turns. The leaves were that perfect golden orange, and the forest looked like something out of a postcard. I was traveling solo in my RV, planning to stay for about 5 days, off-grid and off-trail. I found a spot way up a dirt road, far away from any established campground. Just a sloped meadow backed up by thick trees. Nobody else around, not even tire tracks. Just me. The first couple of days were incredible. I went hiking, took photos, even brought my drone out. It was peaceful. Birds, wind, the occasional deer rustling through the trees. No service, no notifications, no noise. But on the third night, things started to shift. It started small. I was sitting by the fire when I heard what sounded like someone coughing in the woods. Not an animal. A dry, human cough. Just once. I froze, turned off my lantern and listened. Nothing. I called out, "Hello?" but no response. I figured maybe it was another camper I hadn't seen, or someone hiking nearby. Weird, but not enough to spook me. Until the next morning. I went out behind the RV to gather some wood, and on the side of the rig, near the rear wheel well, were 5 long scratches, like claw marks. They weren't deep enough to go through the metal, but they weren't shallow either. I tried convincing myself it was a bear, but the spacing was too wide, and the way the lines curved downward, they looked more like fingers. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing twigs snap in the distance. Movement. At one point, I heard what sounded like a whisper, just one word, my name. I bolted upright. I know what I heard. It was faint, like someone standing 30 feet from the RV. Hecky. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. Nothing, just the wind. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I seriously considered leaving. I packed up a few things, but then convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I stayed one more night, my last. That night is burned into my memory. Around midnight, I started hearing what sounded like footsteps running around the RV. Not walking, running, fast, circling, then tapping. Soft tapping on the back window, then the side, then the door. I jumped up and yelled out, "I'm armed!" hoping to scare off whatever it was. Everything went dead silent for about 5 minutes. Then came the whistle, 3 notes, low, high, low, coming from the woods. And then a reply from the opposite side. I grabbed my keys, fired up the RV, and floored it down that dirt road in pitch black, headlights bouncing, tires skidding on loose gravel. I didn't stop until I reached pavement, and even then, I drove another 2 hours into town. I parked at a Walmart lot and sat there till morning, heart pounding. When I checked the RV the next day, there was mud all over the back door, handprints, small. Too small for an adult, but the fingers were too long to belong to a child. I went back later with a friend to try to find that campsite. We couldn't find the road I had taken. I swear it was there before, a clear dirt path, but it was gone, overgrown, as if it hadn't been used in years. And the weirdest part? When I checked my dash cam, the footage from that last night was corrupted. Just static from 11:53 p.m. until 3:14 a.m. Since that trip, I don't camp alone anymore. I keep a bat near the door and motion sensors outside the RV. I still don't know what I experienced out there. A cult? A group of people messing around? Something else entirely? I don't know. But I do know one thing. If you're in the San Juan National Forest and you hear someone whistling at night, don't whistle back, don't move. And whatever you do, don't open the door. I've done a lot of boondocking in my life. I enjoy the solitude, the quiet, the kind of silence you can only find miles away from civilization. But what happened in the San Juan National Forest? It changed how I see the woods. It made me question how much of the wilderness is really untouched, and what might be out there, watching. This was back in early September. I had been following a recommendation from an older couple I met in New Mexico. They told me about this secret camping spot tucked off a side road near the Piedra River. "It's magical," the woman had said. "Quiet, beautiful, and completely free." She wrote down rough directions, not GPS coordinates, which should have been my first red flag, but I liked the sound of it. Something off the beaten path. Peaceful, authentic. It took me nearly 4 hours of winding through narrow dirt roads to get there. I passed some abandoned structures, looked like hunting cabins maybe, all sun-bleached and collapsed. Eventually, I found the spot. They weren't lying. It was beautiful. A small open meadow with tall pine trees surrounding it, and a shallow stream running behind where I parked the RV. There wasn't a soul around. The first day went smooth. I cooked, explored a little, even strung up my hammock between 2 trees. That night, I fell asleep listening to the soft rustle of wind in the trees and the bubbling creek. Total peace. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. Not from a noise, but from a smell. It was rancid, like rotting meat mixed with wet soil, thick. I sat up, turned on my RV's interior lights, and looked around. Nothing. But the smell was inside now, and it was strong. I stepped out with my flashlight to check underneath, thinking maybe something had crawled under the rig and died. But there was nothing there. Then, as I turned around, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A figure, maybe 50 feet away, just standing at the edge of the tree line. It was too dark to make out clearly, but it was tall. Still. And it didn't move when I shined the light toward it. I blinked, looked again. It was gone. I chalked it up to being half asleep, went back in, and locked the doors. But I couldn't sleep after that. The next day, things got weirder. I noticed footprints in the dirt around my RV, bare feet, long toes, not fresh, but not old either. They circled the RV, twice, then wandered off into the woods. That evening, I started to get this strange feeling in my chest, like pressure, like I wasn't alone. I sat outside by the fire for a while, just watching the woods, listening. It was too quiet. No birds, no wind, not even the creek. Like everything was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a scraping noise, soft, deliberate, like something dragging across bark. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound and caught a glimpse of movement. Something ducking behind a tree. Not a bear, not a deer, taller, faster. I didn't wait around to investigate. I got inside, bolted the door, and stayed up, listening. That whole night I heard tapping. Software, on the RV walls, different places, like someone moving around it, slowly. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the lights cut out, my power was gone, battery, solar, everything, dead, and I swear to you, I heard someone say my name outside the window. Heikki. It wasn't whispered, it was spoken, calm and clear, like someone who already knew me. I sat frozen, didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stayed there, clutching my flashlight, praying the sun would rise soon. When dawn finally came, I threw everything into gear and left. No coffee, no food, just drove. I didn't even dump the tanks, I just got out. The strangest thing? When I stopped later at a gas station and went to check under the RV, I found a handprint smeared in mud on the inside of my rear wheel. Well, inside. There's no way someone could get in there while I was driving unless they were already hiding underneath. I haven't gone back since. I even tossed the directions that old couple gave me. But sometimes I wonder, were they really just friendly travelers? Or were they sending me there for a reason? Whatever lives in those woods, it remembers you. And I think it waits for people like me. People who like to camp alone, off-grid, deep where no one can hear you scream. I've never been someone who scares easily. I've camped solo in rain, snow, and even through a bear encounter once in Montana. But what happened to me in the San Juan National Forest still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. I wasn't prepared for what I found there, or maybe more accurately for what found me. This happened in late October. I wanted one last trip before the snow started coming down hard. The idea was to spend 4 days off-grid, totally alone, in a remote spot where I could just breathe, read, write a little, and reset. I'd been under a lot of stress, life stuff, you know? So the quiet seemed like the right medicine. I found a spot on a ridge with a stunning view. Tall pines behind me, a drop-off in front, and nothing but distant hills and trees for miles. I was about 30 minutes from the nearest dirt road, which itself was a solid hour from anything paved. This place was secluded. The first day was perfect. I hiked a little, cooked over the fire, watched the sunset bleed across the sky. I even remember thinking I should stay an extra day. That night, though, I had the strangest dream. It was one of those vivid ones that feels too real. I was standing outside my RV, and a man was walking toward me from the woods. He had no shirt, just old-style pants that looked handmade. His skin was grayish, and his eyes were completely black. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stopped just a few feet away, stared into me, and whispered something I couldn't understand. It sounded like a different language, harsh, almost broken, like gravel in a blender. Then I woke up gasping, completely drenched in sweat. The next morning, I laughed it off. Figured maybe I ate something weird, but something felt off. You know that feeling when you're being watched? That was hanging over me all day. I kept glancing toward the trees, swearing I heard movement. Nothing ever there, but I started to feel like the forest was listening. That night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside. Not animals, not the fast scampering of deer or coyotes. These were slow, heavy, deliberate, like boots crunching dry pine needles. I turned off all my lights, grabbed my knife, didn't make a sound. Then I heard a knock, just once. On the back of the RV, I stayed dead still. Another knock, closer to the door now. Then, silence. I stayed up the rest of the night, too afraid to move. As soon as the sun came up, I went outside to check. There were bare footprints in the dirt, human-sized, leading up to the RV and not leading away. I spent that whole day uneasy, constantly scanning the tree line, waiting to see someone, anyone, step out. But no one came. Then came the third night. I didn't sleep. I sat up with my knife and flashlight trying to rationalize everything. That's when I heard it again, the language from the dream. It was being whispered all around the RV. It wasn't coming from one direction. It was like it was in the trees themselves, the same low, gravel-filled mumbling. Then the lights on my control panel started flickering. My water pump kicked on by itself. My fridge beeped, door open. But nothing was open. I stood up to check and realized the back door was unlocked. I swear I had locked it. I always lock it. I ran to it and slammed it shut. Locked it 3 times over. But before I could even breathe, something hit the side of the RV, hard, like someone body slammed it. Then again, boom. Then silence. I didn't hear anything else that night, didn't sleep. And at first light I got out. Didn't pack properly, didn't clean up, didn't even dump my tanks. I just gunned it down that mountain. About halfway down the road, I glanced in my side mirror. And I swear, on everything I love, there was someone standing in the trees, right on the edge of the road, watching me. just standing there. Same grayish skin, no shirt, black eyes. When I got to town, I went straight to a diner and sat there for hours. I told the waitress I wasn't feeling right, and she actually told me, without me mentioning a thing, "You didn't go camping up on Devil's Ridge, did you?" I froze. She said there had been stories going back generations about that area. People vanishing, seeing things, hearing forest whispers. She called it the place where the trees remember. I didn't tell her what I saw. I didn't need to. I haven't been back since, and I won't. Whatever's out there in the San Juan woods, it isn't a bear, it isn't a person. It's older than both, and it knows your name long before you arrive. I almost didn't tell this story, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if anyone would believe me. Even now, when I think about it, it messes with my head. But I guess that's the thing about the forest. Sometimes you go looking for peace and come back with something you'll carry for the rest of your life. This happened about a year ago. I just bought a used Class CRV. Nothing fancy, but solid enough to get me out into nature. I wanted to break it in, so I decided to head to Colorado, specifically the San Juan National Forest. I'd read online about some really quiet spots off Route 160, and I figured with the weather still holding out, I could squeeze in a weekend of solitude. I found a place that was barely marked on the map, a narrow dirt road that looked like it hadn't been driven in months. The further I went in, the more isolated it got. No signs, no campers, no tire tracks, just thick trees and that heavy, ancient quiet. Eventually I reached a clearing, beautiful, open, with a mossy patch that looked perfect for a small fire. Behind it was a dense wall of forest, and beyond that, nothing. Total silence. I parked the RV, stepped outside, and just stood there for a while, breathing it all in. The first night went smoothly. I made dinner, read a little, and fell asleep to the sound of wind moving through the trees. Felt good to disconnect, but around 3 a.m., something woke me up. It was this deep, metallic humming. Not loud, but low, almost like a vibration. At first, I thought it was a mechanical issue, maybe the generator acting up. I stepped outside to check. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. I could see my breath, and everything felt still, like the forest was holding something in. That's when I noticed a light through the trees. Faint, bluish-white, like moonlight. But it was coming from deep within the woods. It pulsed like a heartbeat. It didn't feel right. I should have stayed put. I should have locked the RV and waited for morning. But something, curiosity, maybe something else, made me grab my flashlight and follow it. The light moved as I did. It stayed just ahead, like it was guiding me or luring me. The deeper I went, the stranger everything felt. My flashlight began flickering, and the humming got louder. It started vibrating in my chest, like the air itself was charged. Eventually, I reached this open grove surrounded by thick pines. In the center was a stone circle, half buried and covered in moss. Ancient looking, like something no one had touched in hundreds of years. And standing inside that circle was a figure, not moving, just standing, wearing what looked like a hooded robe made of something coarse. I couldn't see its face. I didn't want to. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt frozen. Then the humming stopped. Total silence. The figure slowly raised an arm, not to wave, not to greet, but just pointed at me. Long fingers, not right, not human. I turned and ran. The forest didn't look the same. The path I took had vanished. The trees felt closer, like they were moving, closing in. My flashlight died. I was running blind, branches cutting my arms and face, heart pounding so loud I thought it might explode. Somehow, I made it back to the RV. I don't remember unlocking the door. I just remember slamming it shut and crouching in the dark, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. I didn't sleep, didn't move, just stared out the front window. At one point, I swear, I saw footprints appear in the frost outside, one after another, slow, steady, leading straight to my door. They stopped right at the step, but nothing knocked, nothing entered. They just stayed there all night. As soon as the sky started to lighten, I turned on the engine and got the hell out. I drove for miles, not even stopping for gas until I hit Durango. A few days later, I noticed something strange with the RV. There was a handprint on the back window, smudged, oily, as if something had leaned there, watching. But it was too large, fingers too long, and it was on the inside. I've had the RV deep cleaned since. Changed the locks, even installed cameras. But sometimes when I park in remote places, I still hear the humming, just for a moment. Like something is reminding me that I saw it, that I walked too far into the forest, and came back changed. The San Juan National Forest is beautiful. But if you go deep enough, off trail, where the maps don't show, you'll find places that don't want to be found. Places that don't forget. And if they mark you, they never really let you go. I've done a lot of solo RV camping over the years, but there's one trip that changed the way I look at the woods, especially the San Juan National Forest. Before that trip, I used to think nature was peaceful, healing even. But now I know there are parts of it that aren't meant to be touched. This was late spring, right after a big storm had rolled through the week before. I thought it'd be the perfect time to camp. Fewer people around, fresh air, everything quiet and green. I was craving silence, honestly. I needed time away from the noise of the world. I found a clearing not too far from an old fire road. GPS didn't even pick it up at first. The trees were massive, the kind that block out the sun even at noon. I parked the RV just on the edge of a small slope that led down to a dried creek bed, and about 50 feet past that was nothing but dense forest. The first day was peaceful. I made some food, walked around a bit, took some photos. I even climbed up on the roof of the RV just to watch the sunset over the ridgeline. I remember thinking, man, this is it. This is exactly what I needed. That night, I lit a small fire and sat outside with a beer, just enjoying the sound of the wind through the trees. But around 10:30 p.m. the wind stopped, like completely, dead still. And that's when I noticed something that didn't register at first. There weren't any insects. No frogs, no owls, no crickets. Just silence. Then came the smell. It hit me out of nowhere, this thick, rotting stench like wet dog mixed with sulfur and decay. I thought maybe something had died nearby, maybe a deer or something. So I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the tree line, but I couldn't see anything. I went inside, locked the door, and told myself it was probably just a dead animal and nothing more. But I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing soft scratching on the side of the RV, like claws dragging across metal. It would come and go in waves, sometimes switching sides. I finally built up the courage to peek out the front window, and I swear something darted just out of view the moment I looked. I didn't see it clearly, just the blur of something tall and pale moving fast. The next morning, I checked around the RV, no footprints. But the passenger side mirror was twisted, bent up in a way I couldn't explain. And the scratch marks, they were real, deep enough to gouge through the paint. I told myself I was being paranoid. that maybe a branch fell or an animal messed with the RV overnight. I stayed another day. That night was worse. I was in bed when I heard whistling. Just one long, flat note. Over and over again. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't wind, it sounded human. But there was no one out there. I knew that. I hadn't seen a soul for miles when I drove in. I killed the lights and sat up, listening. The whistling stopped. Then a low knock on the back door, just one. Then a second knock on the side like whatever it was had moved. I grabbed the small hatchet I keep by the bed and crept up to the front window. I didn't see anything until the porch light flickered on by itself. And in that brief flash, I saw someone standing at the edge of the tree line, barefoot, gaunt, head cocked at an unnatural angle. I only saw it for maybe half a second before the light went out again, but I'll never forget that silhouette. It wasn't right. The limbs were too long, too thin, like its arms reached down past its knees. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, the forest was covered in fog. Heavy, thick, swallowing everything more than 20 feet away. I packed up to leave fast, but when I started the RV, it sputtered and died. Battery was fine, fuel was good, no reason it shouldn't start. I tried again, nothing. Then I heard footsteps on the roof. Heavy, deliberate, walking the full length of the RV. I held my breath, listening to every slow step. I didn't dare move, I just waited. Then it stopped, and everything went quiet again. About 10 minutes later, the fog started to lift. I tried the ignition one more time, and the engine roared to life like nothing had been wrong. I didn't waste a second. I threw it into gear and tore down that fire road so fast I'm surprised I didn't roll the thing. I didn't stop until I hit pavement, and I didn't breathe easy until I saw other cars again. Later, when I took the RV in for maintenance, I asked them to check the roof. The guy called me out into the garage and asked if I'd been messing around on it. There were dents, like footprints, heavy ones, but spaced too far apart for a normal person, and too deep, like something massive had been walking on top of it. I didn't have an explanation. I still don't. All I know is something was out there in that forest, and whatever it wasn't human. I haven't camped alone since. I don't even go near San Juan anymore. That place changed something in me. It made me realize we're not alone in the woods. Some things out there are older than memory. They don't want to be seen. And when you do see them, they make sure you never forget. I used to laugh when people talked about bad energy or cursed places. I figured that kind of talk was just people trying to spice up ghost stories. But that was before the trip that made me swear off solo RV camping in San Juan National Forest for good. It started off like any other trip. I had just wrapped up a stressful few weeks, and I needed a mental reset. I looked at the map and found a small, out-of-the-way spot near Hermosa Creek, somewhere I could post up for a few nights off-grid, surrounded by nothing but trees and sky. Sounded perfect. The road getting there was rough, narrow, gravelly, a little too quiet. No cell signal, no cars, no signs of life. I passed what looked like the ruins of an old ranger station. Just a mossy foundation, maybe a collapsed chimney. I remember thinking it was strange that it wasn't on the map, but I kept going. By late afternoon, I found a clearing, small, tucked into the pines. I backed the RV in, made camp, set out my chair, and just breathed in the silence. That night, I cooked a dinner on my portable stove and watched the stars come out. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. But it wasn't peaceful. It was too quiet. Like the forest was waiting for something. I didn't think much of it until about 3 a.m. when something woke me up. A thud, on the side of the RV. Not loud, but hard, like someone had slapped the metal wall with an open palm. I froze. Another thud, this time near the back. I sat up slowly and listened. The forest outside was still dead silent. No wind, no bugs, no birds. Just the faint ticking of the RV cooling off. Then came the scratching. It started near the rear window, like nails dragging lightly across glass. Then it moved, fast, around to the side door. My flashlight was already in my hand, but I didn't dare turn it on. I just sat there in the dark, holding my breath. And then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, barely a whisper. Like it was trying to mimic something human, but couldn't quite get it right. It said, "Come out." I damn near dropped the flashlight. I stayed still, didn't move a muscle. Then came laughter. Slow, raspy, like whoever, or whatever it was, thought it was funny, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of sound you hear when someone pretends to laugh, but they don't understand why people do it. It went on for almost a minute. Then, nothing. I sat there until the sun came up. I didn't even blink. That morning, I opened the door and checked around the RV. There were handprints on the side. Long fingers. Smudged like someone dragging dirty skin across the metal. And on the back window, scratch marks. Deep enough to gouge the glass. I should have left right then and there, but like an idiot, I convinced myself it had to be a person. Some crazy drifter messing around. So I decided to drive into town and come back later. Maybe clear my head. Except when I turned the key, nothing happened. Battery was fine. Fuel was good. No reason it shouldn't start. Just like the last time this happened out here. So I grabbed my gear and decided to hike back toward the main road. Figured I'd get a ride or signal eventually. But about 10 minutes into the trail, I realized something terrifying. The path had changed. I'm serious. The trees were wrong. The trail curved where it shouldn't. Even the light looked different, too dim for mid-morning. Like the forest was closing in on itself. I turned around, no trail behind me, just trees. Solid, silent trees. That's when I heard footsteps again, but this time they were behind me, slow, deliberate. Like whoever it was wanted me to know they were following. I ran. I didn't care where, I just ran. At some point, I stumbled into the creek bed and followed it upstream, figuring it had to lead somewhere. After about 40 minutes of sprinting and scrambling, I found a paved road, a highway, real cars. I flagged down a passing pickup and didn't even care how crazy I looked. The guy was kind enough to drive me into Durango. I didn't tell him the whole story, just said someone tried to break into my RV. He nodded like he'd heard it before. A few days later, I paid a tow company to haul the RV out. The guy who went to pick it up said something weird, though. He said it wasn't where I described. Said the RV was parked in front of the old ranger station, the one I saw when I first arrived, but never camped near. There were no tire tracks leading to it, no path in, just there. I swear, on everything I love, I never moved it. I don't have an explanation. I've talked to a few people since, and one local told me there are places in San Juan where the land remembers too much. Places that don't forget. Places that change while you're inside them. I don't camp alone anymore. And if I ever feel that kind of silence again, that deep, bone-humming stillness where the world forgets itself, I turn around and leave. Because out there in the deep woods, something waits. And the second you acknowledge it, it knows you forever. I never thought I'd say this, but some forests, they just feel wrong. Not because of wild animals or bad weather, but because of something deeper. something you can't see. You only feel it when you're alone, miles from the nearest person, and the trees start feeling like they're watching you. It was late October when I headed back to San Juan National Forest. I'd camped there before without any trouble. It's beautiful, towering pines, crisp mountain air, and during fall, it glows with golden aspens. But this time I tried a new spot, a place someone on an RV forum recommended. Said it was quiet, secluded, not even on the official maps. Just follow a rough trail off Forest Road 585 and look for 2 split boulders. That's where the road forks. I found it easily enough. It looked perfect. Flat ground, good tree coverage, no trash or signs of other campers. I set up for a weekend stay. I had firewood, solar, plenty of food, and a few books. I wasn't even expecting cell signal, so I was fully prepared to be off-grid. But from the very first night, things felt off. I went to bed around 9:30 p.m. after reading by lantern light. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of snapping twigs outside. At first, I figured it was deer, maybe an elk, but the steps were too careful, not the kind of clumsy, crashing animals usually make. These were deliberate, like footsteps. They circled the RV once, twice, then silence. I stayed awake until dawn, didn't sleep a wink. When the sun came up, I checked around, no tracks. Ground was mostly pine needles, so I figured maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks in the dark. That morning, something else strange happened. I walked about 100 yards into the woods behind the RV to relieve myself. On my way back, I noticed something nailed to a tree. It was an old Polaroid photo, weathered, edges curled. A blurry picture of, I don't even know. A person, maybe, standing in the trees. But what freaked me out was the note scribbled on it in faded marker. Don't listen to it after dark. No explanation, just that. I brought it back with me. Sat in the RV, staring at it for hours, debating whether I should just leave, but I didn't. I convinced myself it was some sick prank, maybe an old camper messing around. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they stopped right at the door. And then, something began to tap on the handle. Soft at first, then faster. I grabbed my flashlight and shouted, "Who's there?" Silence, then came the voice. It sounded like a woman, but distorted. Like it was being played through a busted speaker, lagging, glitching. It said, "It's safe now. You can come outside." Every instinct in my body screamed no. I stayed still, didn't move a muscle. Then it said again, "Come outside. I need help." But it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like an order wrapped in fake concern. Like something pretending to be human but not quite getting it right. I sat there, frozen, until the sun came up. When I finally looked outside, there was nothing. No prints, no sign of anyone. Except the photo I'd brought into the RV, it was gone. I had placed it on the table, vanished. That was it. I was done. I packed everything fast, didn't even eat breakfast. I just wanted out. But as I drove back toward the main road, I passed the fork near the 2 boulders again, and I swear to you, I saw myself standing there. I know how that sounds. But standing just off the tree line, same clothes, same backpack, same everything, was me, just watching the RV roll by. I didn't stop, I didn't slow down. I drove for nearly 3 hours straight until I reached a gas station near Durango. I must have looked insane when I walked in, because the clerk asked if I was okay. I lied, said I saw a bear, but the truth is, I don't know what I saw. I haven't been back to that forest since. I don't plan to, but sometimes, even now, I'll be lying in bed back home and hear it in my head. That same glitched voice, whispering from the edge of sleep. "It's safe now. You can come outside." and every time I hear it, I wonder, what would have happened if I had? I've done solo RV camping for years. It's always been my way to escape, to breathe a little deeper, clear my head. But there's one trip I've never told anyone about until now, mostly because it still messes with my head. What happened in San Juan National Forest during that trip, I still can't explain it, and honestly, I don't want to try too hard to understand. It started as a spontaneous weekend plan. I was going through some personal stuff, stress, a bad breakup, burnout, and I just needed to unplug. I'd been to San Juan before, but only in the busier spots near Pagosa Springs. This time, I wanted total solitude. A ranger I'd met online told me about this little-used path off a county road, 124. Said it wasn't on most maps, but it led to a perfect, flat clearing by a stream. No amenities, totally off-grid, exactly what I was looking for. I got there Friday afternoon, set up my RV in the clearing just as the sun was dropping behind the trees. The place was dead silent. No cell signal, no planes overhead, just birds, wind, and water. First night went smooth. Peaceful, even. I fell asleep listening to the stream through the cracked window. But I woke up around 3 a.m. to the weirdest sound I've ever heard. It was this soft humming. Not a melody, just a flat, constant hum. At first, I thought it might be the RV systems acting up, but I'd turned everything off. I got up, stepped outside with a flashlight, and that's when I realized the hum wasn't mechanical. It was coming from the forest, from multiple directions, surrounding me. The hair on my arms stood straight up. It was so low you could feel it more than hear it, almost like bass. And just when I started to convince myself it was wind or water echoing, it stopped. Just gone. Like someone cut a switch. I stood there in the dark for a while, not even moving. Then I went back in and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. Next day, I tried to shake it off. Hiked around, took pictures, cooked some simple camp food. But that evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A small pile of stones stacked just behind a tree near the RV, balanced like a little tower, about 6 stones high. I hadn't seen it the day before. I would have noticed it. I walked right past that tree setting up camp. And I hadn't seen anyone else around. I knocked it over, trying not to think too hard. Big mistake. That night, I heard the humming again. But this time, it was louder, closer. And then, there were knocks on the side of the RV. Light at first, like fingers tapping. Then louder, bang, 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 like someone slapping the walls with an open palm. I jumped out of bed and turned on every light. Stepped outside with my flashlight again, yelling, "Who's out there?" Nothing, not a sound, not a bird, not even the stream. Then I turned the beam of my flashlight toward the tree line, and I saw something I will never forget. A face, pale, hair matted, eyes wide and glassy like a mannequin's, just staring at me from between 2 trees. Not blinking, not moving. And then, in a split second, it stepped backward, not turned and walked away, but stepped straight back into the darkness like it was gliding. I didn't sleep. I didn't even go back inside. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine running, headlights on, door locked, waiting for the sun to rise. When daylight came, I grabbed my gear and peeled out of there without even securing everything. I just had to leave. As I drove out, I looked in the rearview mirror and nearly swerved off the road. Behind me, in the rear camera feed, I saw something standing right in the middle of the clearing. Same pale figure, just standing still, watching me leave. Back in town, I told the ranger about it, the one who recommended the spot. He got real quiet. Then he said, I probably should have told you this, but that area, folks used to avoid it. There's an old Ute legend about spirits in that valley. They said if you disturb the stones, they follow you. Most people think it's just stories. I didn't say much after that. I just nodded, thanked him, and left. I've camped plenty of places since, but never there, never again. And sometimes when it's really quiet at night, I'll hear a low hum coming from nowhere, and I wonder, did I really leave that place behind? Or did something come back with me? You ever go somewhere and just feel like you weren't supposed to be there? That's exactly what happened to me during what was supposed to be a peaceful RV trip in the San Juan National Forest. I'd driven out there late in the season, early November, when the crowds are gone and snow starts dusting the trees. I was looking for solitude, fresh air, and time to just be still. Instead, I left that forest with a knot in my gut and a memory I've never been able to shake. It started with a recommendation from a gas station clerk in Durango. I'd asked if there were any lesser-known camping spots nearby, and he told me about an old fire service road, 306B, that wasn't maintained anymore but still passable if you had a capable vehicle. He said, "Nobody goes there anymore. Too quiet for most people, but you look like someone who could handle that." That should have been my first red flag, but I was tired. And honestly, it sounded perfect. I found the turnoff just before dusk. The road was rough, sure, but the view, unreal. Rolling hills of pine and aspen, light snow catching the last bit of sun. Eventually, I came to a wide clearing that looked like it used to be a Forest Service site. Overgrown now, but flat enough to park the RV. As I stepped out, I immediately noticed something weird. There were no sounds, no birds, no wind, just silence, like someone hit a mute button on the world. Still, I set up camp, chalked it up to being off-season. As night fell, I built a small fire, made some instant coffee, and tried to unwind. But about 20 minutes after the sun dipped completely, I started hearing this soft, distant ringing, like a tuning fork coming from the trees. I froze, trying to pinpoint it, but it seemed to drift. 1 second it was behind me, the next it was off to the right. It wasn't loud, just persistent. It went on for about 2 minutes, then vanished. I put the fire out and went back into the RV, locking everything up tighter than usual. Around 1:40 a.m. I woke up suddenly. No sound, no reason. Just that gut-deep feeling like something wasn't right. I sat up in bed and listened. Tap, tap, tap. 3 gentle taps on the window above the sink. I didn't move. Then, about 10 seconds later, tap, tap, tap. Same sound, different window, right near the back. My mouth went dry. I slowly reached for my flashlight but didn't turn it on yet. I peeked out one of the side blinds. There was a man standing by the fire pit, just barely visible in the moonlight. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, facing the RV, not moving, not even swaying in the wind, completely still. I watched him for probably 2 minutes, heart pounding. Then, as if he knew I was watching, he turned. Not his body, just his head, slowly, and looked straight at me through the small crack in the blinds. That's when I turned the flashlight on, and just like that, he was gone. I mean, gone. No footsteps, no rustling. Just disappeared. I stayed up the rest of the night with every light on and the RV engine running. By morning, I wanted to convince myself I hallucinated the whole thing. But when I stepped out to check around, there were footprints in the snow, coming right up to the windows on all sides, walking in complete circles around the RV. But here's the part that really messed with me. The footprints only came toward the RV, none going away. I packed up as fast as I could and drove back down that rugged road, swearing to myself I'd never take random suggestions from strangers again. And here's the last thing I'll say. About a week later, I checked the weather for that area. Just curiosity, really. That's when I found a local news story. Hiker found dead near Old Fire Service Road 306B. No sign of foul play. Cause of death, exposure. Found sitting upright against a tree with eyes wide open. The article said he'd been missing for 3 weeks. Same clearing, same forest. And the kicker? His clothes matched the figure I saw outside the RV. I've always loved solo RV camping. It's my escape from the madness of everyday life. The wide open spaces, the solitude, and the peaceful quiet. There's just something calming about being alone in the wilderness. But there's one place in the San Juan National Forest that I'll never go back to, and I think about it more than I care to admit. It all started a few years ago, early in the fall. I'd been working non-stop for months and just needed to get away, to unplug and reset. I found an old little-known camping spot that wasn't too far from a trailhead, and it sounded perfect. The spot was near an old mining area, but it was off the beaten path, deep in the forest. I was told it wasn't popular, which was exactly what I wanted. Peace and isolation. I drove up late in the afternoon, the sun just beginning to dip behind the mountains. The forest was thick with trees, the air crisp and fresh. I found the clearing just as the sky turned that dusky purple. It was perfect. The sound of the creek bubbling nearby was almost like a lullaby. There were no other campers, no cars in sight. It was just me, the RV, and the wilderness. I set up camp and started a fire, preparing my simple dinner. Everything was peaceful, almost serene. But as night fell, I began to feel uneasy. It was hard to explain, but it was as if I wasn't entirely alone. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was imagining things. I went to bed early, hoping to get a good night's sleep. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to something strange. It started with a soft tapping on the RV door. It was light at first, like someone gently knocking. I thought maybe it was an animal, but then it came again. More persistent this time. Tap, tap, tap. I lay frozen in my bed, not knowing what to do. My heart started to race, and my breathing became shallow. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. Then the tapping stopped. For a while, there was just silence. But then I heard something else. Faint, but unmistakable. A voice. A low, guttural whispering that seemed to come from the woods. It was too soft to make out any words, but it sounded like someone was trying to speak to me, or maybe call me into the forest. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, looking around. The night air was cold, and the trees swayed gently in the wind. There was no one there. Nothing. Just the quiet of the forest. But then, I noticed something. Footprints. Large, heavy footprints in the dirt leading away from the RV and into the trees. My heart sank. I hadn't seen anyone near my camp when I arrived, and those tracks weren't from any animal I could identify. They were too large, too human. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to follow them, thinking maybe someone else had camped nearby and wandered off. But as I followed the tracks deeper into the forest, something felt off. The air grew colder, and the whispering seemed to grow louder, closer. I turned a corner, and there it was. A strange structure. At first, I thought it was just a dilapidated old shack, but as I got closer, I realized it was more like a crude, makeshift shelter. It looked like something built out of branches and debris, but the way it was constructed was far too deliberate, as if someone had spent days crafting it. The door to the shelter was slightly ajar, and the whispering seemed to be coming from inside. I couldn't resist. I had to see what was inside. I pushed the door open, and that's when I felt it. A cold wave of dread wash over me. The shelter was empty, but there were scratches all over the walls. Deep, jagged marks like someone had been clawing at the wood. And on the ground, small, odd-shaped rocks arranged in a circle, surrounding a single, blood-red feather in the center. My stomach turned. I had to get out of there. I turned around to leave, but before I could step outside, I heard something. A low growl. Behind me, I spun around. In the doorway of the shelter stood a figure, tall and thin, its face hidden in shadow. It wasn't human, not in the way we think of people. It was wrong. Its arms were too long, and its movements were jerky, unnatural. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me. It wasn't just watching me, it was studying me. I felt my blood run cold. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I sprinted back toward the RV, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of my feet slapping against the cold ground echoing in the night. When I reached the RV, I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. The rest of the night was a blur. I don't know if I slept at all, but when morning came, I packed up my things in record time and left. I didn't look back. To this day, I still don't know what I saw. I've tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks, that the stress had gotten to me. But deep down, I know what I felt. Something wasn't right in that forest. Something was watching me, waiting for me. I've been back to the San Juan National Forest since then, but I've never gone anywhere near that spot. Some places are better left undisturbed. I've camped in a lot of places over the years, but there's one spot I'll never return to. I went there looking for peace and solitude in the San Juan National Forest, but what I found was something much darker. I don't tell this story often, but I feel like it's time to share it. It all started last spring, when I decided to take a solo trip into the mountains. I'd been reading a lot about off-the-grid camping spots in the area, and one particularly remote location caught my attention. It was a small campsite hidden deep in the forest, far from any main roads or trailheads. The kind of place where you could truly escape from everything. I loaded up the RV with supplies, took a deep breath, and set off toward this secluded paradise. I knew the area was known for its quiet beauty, its vast trees, and the kind of isolation that could make anyone feel like they were the last person on Earth. It sounded perfect. The drive was long, and by the time I reached the dirt road that would take me to the campsite, the sun was beginning to set. I could feel the air growing colder, the atmosphere more intense as the trees closed in around me. The road was narrow and bumpy, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling like something was watching me from the darkness. I shrugged it off as just the natural tension of being in a place this remote. I finally arrived at the site just as the last light of day was fading. It was a beautiful spot, nestled by a fast-moving creek and surrounded by tall, ancient pines. The place was so still, it felt like the world had forgotten about it. I parked the RV, set up my camp, and started a small fire. Everything seemed perfect. But there was one thing that kept bugging me, the feeling of being watched. I couldn't shake the sensation. At first, I blamed it on the isolation, the quiet that made every little sound seem amplified. Nightfall came, and the silence was absolute. No rustling of leaves, no wind, no animal sounds, just the fire crackling. I decided to go inside the RV and read for a bit before bed. That's when I heard it. A thud. It was soft at first, like something hitting the side of the RV. I didn't think much of it, maybe a branch or a rock rolling down the hill. But then there was another thud, and then a third. It started to sound deliberate, like something was actively pounding on the side of the RV. I froze. My heart started racing. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it through the windows, but I didn't see anything. Just the dark, unbroken line of trees. Then came the whisper. A voice. It was too soft to make out the words, but I could tell it was coming from outside. The voice was low, almost 100. I couldn't understand it, but I could feel it. The presence, the wrongness. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed my jacket, went outside, and scanned the area around the RV. There was no one there. Nothing but the trees, the creek, and the oppressive darkness. The whispers had stopped. Everything was eerily quiet again. I thought maybe I was just exhausted, that I was imagining things. I went back inside, locked the door, and tried to sleep. But it wasn't over. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound that made my blood run cold. Scratching. Something was scratching at the roof of the RV. Slow, deliberate scratches like claws dragging across metal. I sat up, staring into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching continued for what felt like hours. It didn't sound like any animal I knew. It was too precise. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, and stepped outside. The cold night air hit me, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. The scratching had stopped. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. There, just past the edge of the campsite, was a figure. It was standing still, just inside the trees, watching me. I couldn't make out any details, just the shape of a person. Tall, thin, and unnaturally still. The longer I stared at it, the more wrong it felt. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back. My pulse raced, and I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest. The figure didn't move, but I could feel it. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. Something about it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I backed away, unsure of what to do. My mind was racing, my body frozen in place. And then, just as I was about to turn and run, the figure slowly tilted its head. Almost like it was examining me. Like it was trying to understand what I was doing there. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. I ran back to the RV, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I didn't even bother packing up. I just started the engine and sped down the dirt road, not stopping until I reached the nearest town. I've never gone back to that place. I've never told anyone about what I saw that night, because part of me still doesn't want to believe it was real. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw. And I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, like something was just waiting for me to let my guard down. There are things in the forest, things that we don't understand. And some places, once you've been there, they stay with you. That campsite, it's one I'll never return to, and I don't think I'd ever want to.